Greetings, creatures, cadavers, and curious mortals, and welcome to Radio Transylvania, where we discuss spooky songs, eerie tunes, and things that go bump in the night. In this episode, we'll be getting to the root of all evil with two songs about ghoulish greenery. First up, we're going to talk about the song Ghoulie Garden, which comes from the television program Groovie Goolies, a Filmation cartoon that first aired in 1970. It was originally paired with Sabrina the Teenage Witch as a companion to the studio's popular The Archie Show. Characters would cross over between shows, and they even had a combined theme song. Filmation producer Lou Scheimer brought in laugh-in writers Jack Mendelson and Jim Milligan to develop a show with a similar format, but for kids. Therefore, Groovie Goolies has very little plot, a lot of jokes and one-liners, with a few longer scenes and songs in between. And because this is a Filmation show, there's recycled animation for days. The Universal Classic monsters were having something of a comeback in the 60s. So the creators decided to use Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, Can't Catch Me Pedants, and the Wolfman as the main trio, often referred to as Drac, Frankie, and Wolfie. Basically, the show is about these three monsters and various other background characters living in Horrible Hall, a castle full of mayhem, spells, and musical instruments. According to CBS head of children's programming at the time, Fred Silverman, quote, "We went as far as we legally could," unquote, as far as similarities to the Universal classics were concerned. The success of Scooby-Doo, Where Are You?, a cartoon that also aired on CBS, was also a likely factor in choosing the horror theme. Every episode of Groovie Goolies featured two songs, in addition to the theme song. Sometimes these were sung by the Ghoulies themselves, and the song we're discussing today fits into that category, but sometimes songs were performed by a guest band, like the Rolling Headstones or the Mummies and the Puppies.
Today, the Mummies and the Puppies will play your request. What would you like to hear?
Be still, my ghoulish heart.
The claws of you. Rhapsody in Boo.
Filmation had already seen success in incorporating music into a show with Archie. According to Lou Scheimer, quote, "Music really works in a Saturday morning show," unquote. So it's no surprise that they decided to have musical guests in Groovie Goolies. The fourth episode of this show aired on October 3rd, 1970, and featured the song we'll be discussing tonight, Ghouly Garden, written by Linda Martin and Sherry Gayden, and performed by the Groovie Goolies. This song opens with a take on the nursery rhyme, Mary, Mary, Quite Contrary, sung supposedly by two recurring characters called Ratso and Batso. Now, that's if we're trusting the visuals, but the voices sound nothing like the characters. But what are we going to do? Animate two entirely new characters just for this song? Please, we've got some perfectly good ones lying around. Don't listen to me, Filmation. I love you. This calm tune is quickly interrupted by Drac, and then the song settles into its bubblegum rock style.
Little Ghoulie, tell me truly, how does your garden grow? With silver bells and cockle shells
And monsters all in a row.
In the video for Ghoulie Garden, Ratso and Batso explore a garden run by Hagatha, but this is no ordinary garden. It's alive! The crabgrass has pinching claws. The clinging vine really clings to you, and you'd better not touch those apples.
It's the Ghoulie Garden. It's the Ghoulie Garden. They aren't exactly farming in the Ghoulie Garden.
Now, as someone who consumes a lot of content, particularly cartoons, that is meant for kids, I think that there's something of a spectrum that this content falls somewhere on. between this is clearly just for kids and it would be very difficult for an adult to enjoy this, and this is family friendly, but it's got complex character development and there's no reason an adult couldn't enjoy it. Let's say, using spooky examples, that Vampirina is on one end of the spectrum and Over the Garden Wall is at the other, and things fall somewhere in between. Groovie Goolies probably falls a little closer to the for kids end of the spectrum than most of the cartoons that I enjoy, and you can clearly tell that it's a product of the era it was made in. And I would say that the same can be said for this song. However, that doesn't mean that it's not enjoyable. It's fun. It's got a little bit of a beat that you can groove to. It's about plants. There are some puns. I like puns. So I put this one tentatively on the playlist. I wouldn't put it on my best of playlist, but if this came on in the background of a Halloween party, I'm not mad. As far as I could tell from my search, there are not any covers of this song. If you want to change that, please send me the results. However, you can find a quality file of the original, which is a clean track, no laugh track, no sound effects from the show, on the Groovie Goolies soundtrack, which is a thing that exists. You can find it on eBay, or you can find it at your local record shop, maybe. I did. Browsing the tiny Halloween section at Spin Records in Carlsbad. God, I miss browsing. That's also how I found out that this cartoon existed in the first place, so local record shops. You never know what you're gonna find. I would also say that Ghoulie Garden falls somewhere in the middle of Groovie Goolies songs. It's not their worst. It's not their best. It's not the most spooky, but it's not their least spooky. At the end of the day, I enjoy listening to it, so on the playlist it goes. The video for Ghoulie Garden ends with Orville chasing the boys out of the garden. Orville is a potted plant with a big mouth who will eat just about anything. Clearly was heavily influenced by Audrey 2, which, segue, brings us to song number 2, Don't Feed the Plants, the finale of the musical Little Shop of Horrors. Little Shop of Horrors began its life as The Little Shop of Horrors, a 1960 horror comedy film directed by Roger Corman and written by Charles Griffith. The film was shot in just 2 days, using sets that were left over from Corman's previous film in the short window before they were scheduled to be torn down. While this film in and of itself has a cult following, the small-budget, hastily created project would probably have been relegated to relative obscurity if it hadn't been adapted into a musical by Howard Ashman and Alan Menken. The show premiered off-Broadway in 1982 and has since had productions on Broadway and the West End, and a movie version was released in 1986. Now I'm going to pause here for a moment and say I mentioned I'm talking about the finale of the show. There will be spoilers. If you have not seen Little Shop of Horrors before, beg you to go find this flick. Rick Moranis is in it, Steve Martin is there, your favorite Disney composers made this before Howard Ashman died. And the puppet, y'all, the puppet. It's so good. Practical effects. Go watch this thing. Go do it and then come back. Okay. The basic plot of Little Shop is this. Seymour is a poor florist on the wrong side of town.
Poor. All my life I've always been poor.
The florist shop that he's working in is not doing too hot. Mr. Mushnick, who runs the shop, is this close to closing it, and Audrey, who also works there, is in an abusive relationship. Seymour finds, through his hobby of tending to strange and unusual plants, this weird little Venus flytrap looking thing, which he names after Audrey because he is hopelessly in love with her. And this strange and unusual plant brings people into the shop. Business is doing well. It's succeeding. Small catch, plant eats blood. Oops. Human blood. Well, that's going to be difficult. So Seymour feeds the plant one way or another. Different versions give Seymour different levels of culpability, but the plant grows, the success grows, But oh gosh, this thing's very big now, and it talks and it eats people, and that's a problem. So Seymour and the plant have a showdown, and it goes some way or another, depending on the version. Let's dig into that. Throughout the various versions of Little Shop, there have been a lot of changes. In the Corman film, the plant is named Audrey Jr., and the faces of its victims appear in its flowers. In the end, Seymour dies, but Audrey and Mushnick live. In the stage play, the plant is named Audrey II, Jr. no more. The flower faces are largely omitted, but they do make an appearance in the finale, as the four main characters, who have all died, appear as part of the plant during the final song. The movie intended to keep this dark ending. The entire sequence was filmed where massive Audrey IIs tear down buildings, eat entire trains, and conquer the Statue of Liberty. I think this whole thing is great, but test audiences, not the biggest fans. So just like that, all of this amazing puppetry and model work was completely scrapped and replaced with a generic Hollywood ending where Audrey and Seymour defeat the plant and live happily ever after. Okay, I gotta be real. I do have a little bit of a soft spot for this ending. I'm kind of in a why not both camp, but I understand that the original is better. When I first heard the song Don't Feed the Plants, it was on the film soundtrack, and I had assumed it was a credit song, but no, it doesn't appear in the film's credits. See, I was in elementary school at the time, so I just sort of let that go for a while, but I love Little Shop, so of course eventually I learned all about the original ending. When the film was first released on DVD, the original ending was included as black and white unfinished footage on a bonus feature. But producer David Geffen wasn't happy with how this rough footage looked, because it didn't have the scoring, it was all in black and white, it wasn't polished. So he didn't like that it had been released, and copies were pulled from the shelves. So only a few rare people actually had the DVD with this ending, and for years, the only way to see it was to find grainy black and white footage on YouTube that people who had happened to get their hands on a copy of the DVD had managed to get up there. But luckily for us all, in 2012, Warner Brothers released a director's cut of the film, with the original ending restored in full color and even tacked on as the ending to the film, as opposed to a bonus feature, so you can just watch it the whole way through and see everyone die, as Oz intended. Don't Feed the Plants is the song of the original ending. It's the moral of the show, it's a warning to the audience, and it's a fun, upbeat song that nicely juxtaposes the destruction of the plant destroying the theater or the world, depending on your adaptation.
Hold your hand and hang on to your soul. Something's coming to eat the world whole.
I'm going to throw in here that I've always had a bit of an issue with the premise at the beginning.
Subsequent to the events you have just witnessed, unsuspecting jerks from Maine to California made the acquaintance of a new breed of flytrap and got sweet-talked into feeding it blood.
Because what made Seymour successful was how unique the plant was. Keeping it alive meant fame and fortune because he had the only mysterious plant. But with Audrey IIs available in grocery stores across the country, how are they able to sweet-talk people into feeding them? You know what? It's a crafty plant, though. I could see it finding a way. But that's my one small nitpick about one of my favorite musicals. Probably my favorite musical of all time, not written by Stephen Sondheim category. Anyway, greed is bad. Because this is a great musical with memorable songs and a small cast, it has been performed many, many, many times. So there are a lot of versions of this song out there. Do you want it in Icelandic? Here you go. One interesting note regarding this song is that another song written for the stage show, We'll Have Tomorrow, was cut during development, but a reference to the song remained in the finale. In the film's original ending, this line of singing was cut because we no longer had the faces appearing in the flowers. but there is a guitar riff to the same tune in its place. And, of course, in the final cut of the film, Don't Feed the Plants is removed altogether. So it's interesting how We'll Have Tomorrow just gradually faded away, bit by bit. That song isn't spooky at all, so I'm not going to go too in-depth about it, but it's pretty, and it's worth checking out if you're a Little Shop fan or an Ashman Menken fan.
We'll have tomorrow if we make it through tonight.
Ultimately, Don't Feed the Plants also isn't especially spooky, but it's about a big monster taking over the world. So I think it deserves a seat at the table. It's fun, it's got a message, and it passes the "does this make more sense as a Halloween song than I Want Candy" test. I think few people would call this their favorite song from Little Shop of Horrors, and I will 100% be talking about this musical again, mark my words. But it's a solid and oft-forgotten number that would fit in fine as Halloween party music. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Radio Transylvania. Once again, the songs we discussed tonight were Ghoulie Garden, written by Linda Martin and Sherry Gayden, performed by the Groovie Goolies, and Don't Feed the Plants by Howard Ashman and Alan Menken, performed by the cast. If you want to suggest a song to appear in a future episode, or if you just have a comment, a question, or want to say hi, contact us at radiotransylvaniapodcast@gmail.com. We are also on iTunes now, as well as various social media platforms. You can find it all at radiotransylvania.com. That's Transylvania with a Y. I am your host, Sheila O'Neill. I researched, wrote, and recorded this episode. Our artwork is by Mark Patricio, and our opening and closing music and sound effects are by Nico McCallis. You can find all three of us and see what other work we've done at radiotransylvania.com. Click on The Team. Thank you, and good night.